Things change quickly for the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancocks.
Oh, well.
I don't know. He's appealing for forgiveness for kissing his lover during lockdown, insisting he's only human. Of course, he's just been I'm a Celebrity. And he was breaching COVID lockdown rules, kissing his girlfriend during the pandemic.
Being caught kissing her during the pandemic. Anyway, he's got a new book out. Wow. Surprise. It's serialised in the Daily Mail. He's also revealed he was warned 820,000 people in the UK could die from COVID 2 months before we went into lockdown.
Let's talk to our political reporter, Katherine Forster, who's here. Morning to you.
Hello.
I mean, look, the Mail, which serialising this, says they're jaw-dropping revelations.
Has your jaw dropped?
Well, there's lots of interesting stuff in there. I mean, there are many, many pages in the Daily Mail devoted to this. But, of course, he was there in the thick of it during the pandemic. Decisions that he and others made profoundly affected all of us, didn't they? So, I mean, yes, the 820,000 people could die, he was told in January. He said that most of the cabinet were pretty much in denial, didn't really take it seriously at this point. And it did seem in some ways that the government were late to act, or they were criticised at the time, weren't they? But that he was warned. But other things too, I think particularly about care homes, because, of course, he said, didn't he, we put a protective ring around care homes, where in fact about 20,000 elderly people died in care homes of COVID, and the High Court found against the government early this year. And he's saying they didn't realise about asymptomatic transmission, but also an admission when they were discharging early on from hospital into care homes that simply they needed to get these people out of hospital and that they didn't have enough tests anyway, and that the whole thing was a nightmare. And then a little bit later, apportioning some blame, though he obviously is careful how he does it because he's on shaky ground, saying that basically care home workers were spreading the disease by going to different homes. So he's very noticeably not accepting any blame. His apology is purely for breaking the rules in the clinch with Gina Colladante.
And that's all he's really apologising for?
Yes, because he's saying that he feels that he made the best decisions that he could at the time with the knowledge that he had.
I mean, it's a really difficult one. Carol's been in touch. Morning, Carol. She says, forgive Hancock never. Thanks to him pushing lockdown, I was unable to see my dying mother or attend the funeral. Now, look, you've got to have sympathy with Carol for that, but there'll always be people who blame him for making lockdown too harsh. There's other people saying
they should have brought lockdown in earlier.
Yeah, it wasn't harsh enough, actually, because people died.
Yes, and now, of course, we're seeing some of the results of lockdown in terms of mental health, backlog, etc., etc. So clearly, it was incredibly difficult. This was a pandemic such as we hadn't seen for 100 years since flu, but mistakes obviously were made, and whether people will forgive him, I think, as you say, if you had an elderly relative who died alone or died because they caught COVID, I don't think forgiveness will be forthcoming. But
what else could... I mean, my attitude to it, I've got to say, has to be, well, what else could anyone have done at the time? It was sort of damned if they do, damned if they don't.
Yeah. Hindsight is wonderful, and we know so much now that we didn't know.
Absolutely we do, yes.
Then. But it is bringing this back for a lot of people, isn't it? It's very, very recent history, and we're still living with the after effects of it now. And
the fact that he's brought out this book suggests to me that he does feel he wants to explain to people that he isn't the bad guy.
I think he does, and this is his version of events. And, of course, there's been massive amounts of criticism of him, and particularly by Dominic Cummings, who had said, I repeatedly told the Prime Minister to get rid of Matt Hancocks. So he wants to put his version of events on record. It should be said, obviously, he's made 400,000 potentially from I'm a Celebrity, another 45,000 from SAS Who Dares Wins. The royalties from this book are going to NHS charities, which I suppose is a...
All the royalties?
A gesture. His royalties.
Right.
I mean, it was written with Isabel Oakeshaw, who obviously will be paid, I assume, but he is not personally going to profit from the book financially.